Those of you who have watched my content in the past will already know that my taste in anime can be a bit questionable. And those who weren't yet aware of that, welcome. Don't be scared. This isn't a bad place, just a little weird. The reason I brought up my taste in anime is that recently I realized that I have yet to subject you people to the chaotic comedy masterpiece which just happens to be one of my favorite anime of all time. Granblue, or Granblue Dreaming if you prefer the full English title. For me at least, it's the ultimate feel-good show. Like any other slice of life, it's not some narrative masterpiece that will have you sitting at the edge of your seat in excitement, because it doesn't need to be. It's a show that's full of raunchy humor and good vibes that will not fail to brighten your day when you're feeling down, and at the end of the day, that is just what a feel-good anime should be. But before I get any further into it, hi, it's me again. Sorry for the interruption so early on, but it's important this time. Behold, the dreaded subscription statistic. And as you can see, tis not a good split with about 95% of viewers not being subscribed, so if you find yourself enjoying the content, please do hit that button, as for small channels like this one, it really helps out. And now, I shan't take any more of your time with statistical nonsense, back to Granblue. Like with all my other favourite anime, chiefly amongst which Golden Kamuy, this one can be a bit of an acquired taste, but if you're not afraid of a little sausage fest, you'll be in for some of the funniest and most wholesome alcohol abuse you'll ever see. And it's not just funny haha, it's also funny weird. The show follows the daily life of Iori Kitahara, living out what are often referred to as your best years, having just moved out from his parents for the first time ever, ready to face the wild and wonderful life of a university student. Just think about it, parties, girls and freedom, what is there not to love? That is, until he walks into his uncle's scuba diving shop, which is to be his new home, only to find the place full of large, chiseled men, all buck naked and screaming. And if you are from one of those countries where nudity is a big taboo, sorry, there's going to be a lot of that. Mainly of the male variety, but Granblue isn't without its fair share of waifus either, but more on them in a bit. First, a few more words on the story, which honestly isn't all that important. It's not like Nichijou where the story is completely irrelevant, but this being a slice of life, it isn't all that crucial either. Essentially, after his ill-fated encounter with a building full of drunk nudists, Iori turns in abject terror, being chased down the street by two of the perpetrators called Tokki and Bukki, who then with no small amount of brute strength and blackmail coax Iori into joining the local uni diving club called Granblue. Editing cheese here, the diving club is actually called Peekaboo, it's the shop that's called Granblue, I'm an idiot, but I don't have time to re-record this now. Which seemingly does almost anything except diving, so long as those activities include the chance for public indecency and allows them to get hideously drunk. Observe. And yes, there is some diving involved as well, despite the myriad of non-diving related activities the club likes to engage in. Not that those would be purely frivolous either, there is method to such madness, which then in turn turns into the wholesome side of the show, and it's not just all for gags. All of this fooling around is really a team-building exercise, as the show points out how a key element of diving is not just to have fun, but to be also able to trust your friends for safety, and for that you need a tight-knit group that works well together, both in and out of the water. This naturally then leads to a whole bunch of wholesome moments for standing with, or sometimes on, your friends through thick and thin, and the characters are never afraid to confide in one another for support when things get tough. That is not to say that they wouldn't play pranks on each other or just generally fool around to a stupid degree, most of the time. The Granblue Diving Club and their non-club member friends form one of those stupid fun groups of young adults that will always be there for one another when really called for, but for the other 90% of the time, they will do their level best to infuriate their friends in any way thinkable to either have a laugh about it or for some other equally dumb reason, like wanting the prize money from a beauty contest which may or may not include dressing Iori as a supple young maiden, despite his rather ample leg hair. And, well, with a group this close, there is unavoidably some romance involved too. Some of which is somewhat unhealthy and generally frowned upon in civilized company, looking at you, Siskon Nanaka. But mostly, the romantic side is a little playful and mostly painful, as it is, at least so far in the only season, unrequited. Not that that would stop Granblue from turning sometimes painful topics into jokes as well, which really is one of the strongest sides of the anime. It can talk about heavy topics without actually feeling heavy in a way that still doesn't take away from the gravitas of the subject. But I did promise to talk about the waifus a bit, so let's touch on the single most important part of any slice of life. Its characters. And this is naturally something Granblue does really well. Not to the highest degree, but there is still nothing to really complain about either. It's a show trying to tell a believable story, and so the cast too feels mostly like, well, people. They are multidimensional with aspirations, trauma and growth, and they mostly end up feeling a lot more like actual people you might run into at school or at work, and less like anime characters. But only sometimes, as this is one of those shows that does from time to time go way overboard, so while each character has that side of believability to them, they also have a side where everything is turned up to 11, mostly for comedic effect, that is fully anime. It's a balance that works well, most of the time, as sometimes the switch can be a little sudden. Iori, being the main character, is probably the best example of this, but he is by no definition a waifu, and so he will not do as an example chosen. Instead, I'll use the number one waifu of the show, and my number one overall in any anime ever, Hamaoka Azusa. And no, she's not best girl just because of what she looks like, although I cannot deny that it is certainly a bonus. Azusa is a funny and outgoing girl who is not afraid to join in the drunken madness the rest of the group engages in, and not really in a sexual manner. Well, sort of, since fanservice is always fanservice, but especially for the seasoned member, she is seen as a part of the group rather than an object of desire, even when she's approaching similar levels of undress as everyone else. But that is just the party side of her, you know, the hyper-animified version I mentioned before. Underneath it, she is caring, if still very outgoing, and it's kind of wholesome to see how delighted she is to find a kindred spirit in Iori, even if it is misguided, which arguably makes it a little sad too. That, and she's one of those victims of one-sided love to which she has a very grown-up approach, something that holds true with most of the characters. Not all, but most. That being the other thing I really like about all the characters. They are legal adults, which admittedly is kind of a mood distinction in terms of people who don't actually exist, but what it means is that they can engage in activities your typical high schooler just couldn't, and their lives include events and problems that I at least find a lot easier to relate with, being sort of in the same stage in my life. Sure, this might mean the younger audiences could have problems with relating to everything that goes on, but it's not like Granblue really pushes the adulting part either. Sure, every now and then the time comes when the cast must be responsible and engage in activities that can be described as being adult, but it's never super serious, and it's not like we have them filling in tax forms and paying bills either. It's more taking responsibility and having to be grown up about their own mistakes and desires. When they aren't running in buck naked and drunk out of their minds, of course. And that is kind of the point of the show. It's a warm and funny story about the part of your life when you're free to goof around and make mistakes, but you still have to slowly learn to do adulty things too. And one of my favorites in Granblue is its approach to being an adult. It's not all just doom and gloom, bills and back pain. You're still you, and people who to the outside might be super serious and grown up can still let loose and enjoy life. It's a show about freedom and good vibes, and yes, occasionally about diving too. And on top of it all, Studio Zero G did a pretty good job with the visuals. They aren't exactly known for their world-shattering animations, but for my money, Granblue looks pretty damn good and even beautiful at times. That and the visual humor, while not Bocce the Rock or Mob Psycho 100 levels, still hits the mark spot on. 10 out of 10 would watch again, and I suspect I will. And yes, that is purely rated on my enjoyment. This is not a masterpiece of an anime, but it just hits all the right notes for me to absolutely fall in love with its characters, humor, and just the general feel of it all. Also, on a side note, Granblue is one of those rarest of anime that actually has a decent live-action adaptation, so if that is your thing, you're in luck for once. And so too, this video becomes a live action for the outro. Thank you for watching, and I do hope I have managed to convince you to give one of my all-time favorite animes a try, and if I did, I would once again encourage you to subscribe to the channel. It really does help, and the goal of that magical 1000 is oh so close. If you have already subscribed, you can always comment your thoughts down below to boost the algorithm. Like this if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and check the links in the description if you want to engage with me outside of YouTube. With this, I have been Cheese, and up to you next time. Ta-ta for now.